All right, so we're getting all settled in. Another question I'd love to ask while we have just a minute before we get started is two parts to the question. And actually, while I'm thinking about it, let me turn on my video. There we go. Hi. So, um, in the chat, let me know if you have ever been involved in a real estate transaction that has involved a short sale. And if the answer to that is yes, was it before 2010 or after 2010? We'll just drop that in the chat there. Oh my goodness, Stephanie, Karen, so somewhat recently. And they were all after 20. That is very interesting. Okay. So Steve, you're right there with me. You handled them before. And Jacob, you said you had one right now. I'm curious, Jacob, if you don't mind, tell me what state you're in again. You may have answered up above, but I don't remember. Stephanie, same question to you. Those of you that have had a real recent short sale transaction. So Texas, interesting. Colorado, very interesting. Because that plays a little bit into what we're going to be talking about today. And part of the reason that we wanted to go ahead and present this class is because we're hearing across the country that there's been a little bit of a rise in short sales. So with that, we are right at, well, actually a minute past the top of the hour now. So let's go ahead and dive in and we'll talk about, Jacob says he's definitely seeing more. So good, timely opportunity for this class. But before we get started, I do want to go through a couple of very important reminders. First and foremost is you are independent contractors, which means all of this is optional to you. So again, I very much appreciate your time, and I will endeavor to leave you with a lot of excellent information. And then we're not going to be talking about, prospecting or things of that nature in this class, but just be aware of fraud out there, be aware of advertising guidelines, fair housing, all of that. You know the routine. So let's go ahead and get started. What are we going to talk about today? First and foremost, and it seems like a lot of you do have some experience with short sales, but I think it's very important to understand exactly what a short sale is and how it is different from a foreclosure, because I've seen people using that interchangeably all the time, and they're not the same. So, proficiency in the short sale transactions, the terminology that we're going to be using, the legal and financial implications to the seller, and hopefully some good tips on helping you navigate that process efficiently. So let's start with, what is a short sale? It is a property that needs to be sold for less than the current mortgage balance. That is all it is. A seller in this situation does not have to be in foreclosure. They simply have to be what we call upside down. We'll get to that on the next slide. And for whatever reasons, need to sell. Obviously, it does require the lender's approval. So I always say it's sort of like a reverse loan approval. When you're a buyer, you need to prove to the lender that you are able to pay the mortgage. In a short sale, it's the reverse. The seller is now going back to their lender and trying to prove why they cannot pay the balance on the mortgage. And there's a lot of reasons for this to happen. The financial distress and decline in property value are usually the two most typical reasons. But there's other ones. And I remember, one of my early short sales back in that pre-2010 period, the seller was actually part of the military, and he was being transferred to, I believe it was Japan, and had to sell the house. I mean, they couldn't carry both. And that was a short sale situation, and we were successful. We got it to close. But boy, that was hairy, because it was so new in that whole short sale process for a lot of these lenders, that they were even having a hard time understanding if they're not behind in their mortgage and they still have the wherewithal to pay, why do they have to do a short sale? Well, because they can't pay two mortgages. So we'll talk about those types of situations further as well. Do me a favor as we go through here. I do have the webinar chat up on the screen here, so you see me looking over here. Please don't hesitate to drop your questions in there. If I hit on something or you have a comment or a question, drop it straight into the chat. I do like to have the conversation as we're going through the class today. I find it's a lot easier to try to kind of answer the questions right then and there. So, what is the difference between a short sale and a foreclosure? In general, we want to start by understanding what we mean when we say upside down or underwater. Okay, it's exactly what I was just saying as far as the amount that is owed currently on the mortgage is going to be greater than current market value to be able to sell it. Okay, that is what underwater means. You have to be underwater to do a short sale, because otherwise there would be no point in doing a short sale. You do not have to be underwater to be in foreclosure. And the other thing to keep in mind here is that just because you're doing a short sale does not mean that you are also in foreclosure or even at risk of being in foreclosure. These are very, very separate concepts. Jenny is asking, will I be sharing the slides? We do have a complete handout with like an outline of everything that we're talking about, and we will be sending that to you right after the class is over. So not exactly the slides, Jenny, but yes, you're going to get all of the information that we're discussing. So going on with that, again, like I said, key thing is they are two separate concepts, and one does not necessarily have anything to do with the other. Now, that said, those of us that have done short sales in the past, we do understand that a lot of times these things are running on, like simultaneously. They're like on parallel tracks, and that can add quite a bit of an excitement to our situation. So does a short sale impact their credit score? Yes, absolutely does. A short sale in and of itself, and again, these are just kind of public numbers. I don't claim to be a credit score specialist or anything like that, but typically a short sale is going to cause approximately 100 to 150 point drop on the credit score. Now, having said that, frequently that is going to be less of a drop than if they go through a full foreclosure. And again, I am not one of the credit bureaus, so so each one is going to handle that themselves. Also keep in mind that a short sale will show up on their credit report. It's typically going to be on there showing as a settled or account settled for less than full balance, some language with that. And again, very broadly, it will probably stay on their credit report for about 7 years. I think one of the most important things to keep in mind for somebody talking about doing a short sale is that depending on the lender, there is going to very, very frequently be a waiting period before they can go get a new loan for a new property. And these things can paid as agreed. Exactly. I mean, there's different language that's used, but yes, that is definitely one of them. There's also, like I said, potential waiting periods for new loans. And this can vary depending on what type of a loan vehicle that they're looking for. Could be anywhere from 2 years to 7 years. Interestingly, and again, everything can change, but interestingly, right now, it is easier to get a VA loan or an FHA loan in a shorter period of time after a short sale than it is to get a conventional loan or worse, a jumbo loan. Jumbo loans are going to be the hardest to get afterwards. And then let's talk for just a moment about the deficiency judgments. Okay, now not every short sale is going to involve a deficiency judgment, but it could. And I can speak from kind of personal experience back in the day, and a few of you could probably back me up on this. The deficiency judgments were something that a lot of times the lenders didn't even tell the sellers about, and then they just got hit with them after the fact. So, very, very important in the process, if you're working with a seller in a short sale, is that they absolutely need to check with the lender to see whether or not there is going to be a potential for a deficiency judgment. What is a deficiency judgment? We do the short sale. The lender has agreed to take, X number of dollars from the sale of the property, but what the difference is between what they recoup in the sale of the property versus what the full outstanding loan balance was, that is the deficiency. And the lender has the capability of going into court and getting a judgment from the court to collect on that deficiency. That's a deficiency judgment. Now, I know, hey, Barbara from Miami, I know that all of you are, from all sorts of different states here. Keep in mind that different states will also have different protections. There are certain states that will not allow a deficiency judgment after a short sale. Arizona should come as no surprise to anyone. California does not allow it. Oregon does not allow it. Washington State, where I am, does not allow deficiency judgments after a short sale. Other states, on the other hand, do allow them. Florida, looking at you, Georgia, Texas, so, and this is not an exhaustive list by any means. So please make sure as you embark on, handling a short sale, that you check for yourself whether or not this is a state that allows deficiency judgments. And if it is, definitely suggest to the seller that they check with the lender about that. But Mara, I don't know off the top of my head about South Carolina, but I will try to go back through the chat and pull that information for you, or send you all some resources where you're able to check that information on your own. I just don't remember all 50 states off the top of my head. Oh, we got a bunch of comments in there. Christina, is there one resource for those locations? Well, that's what I was going to check for. In my research, I seem to remember that there is a resource where we can check every state. If I can find that, I will send it out to you after the class, I promise. Can you negotiate out the deficiency judgment as part of the settlement? Yes, absolutely. You are correct, Rocco. And that's why it's so important for the seller to know if that's even a possibility, because yes, they can definitely negotiate that out. And there may be certain situations, again, particularly if we're talking about our active duty military, where regardless of what the state says, it will be negotiated out, right off the top. So it just depends on the situations. If the seller deficient, why would I advise a seller to go for a short sale instead of just letting the property go into foreclosure? Kathy, basically because it's a good question. It's an excellent question. A couple of reasons. Number one, the credit score impact from a short sale is typically less than it is from a full foreclosure. Number two, and probably more important to our conversation right now, is that the deficiency judgment concept exists in the foreclosure process as well. So if the lender goes through the full foreclosure process and then is only able to recoup part of the money, they may go after the seller for that deficiency judgment as well, depending on the state. Let's see. If there is a difference, will the owner receive a 1099? Yes, perfect, exactly. And in fact, they may receive a 1099 anyways, and we're going to get back to that in just a second. When you talk about states that allow the deficiency judgment, are you talking about where the property is located or where the property is located, Cheryl? Excellent question. That it's always depends on where the property is located. You can sell the property in short sale. Bank will pay you and potentially the homeowner as an opportunity to get the money back if there was, all right. So if there is equity in the property, then typically it's not going to be a short sale situation, if I'm understanding your question there. Now, there are some situations where there may be a deficiency once you take into consideration all of the other expenses of closing, but that's not necessarily viewed necessarily as a short sale. Usually a short sale is the difference between the amount outstanding on the mortgage and the reasonable selling value of the property. So maybe I'm not understanding what you were saying, Rocco, but let me know. Let's see. Kathy saying experience with short sales, the seller cannot retain, and that's exactly correct. I personally have never heard of a situation where they've been able to walk away with any money. There are situations in foreclosures, which is a whole nother class coming next month, where sometimes they are able to walk away with a little bit of money in a negotiated foreclosure situation, like a deed in lieu of foreclosure. But generally, in everything that I have seen, everything that I have experienced, they cannot retain any funds. Basically, everything has to zero out at the end. There's no proceeds to the seller. And Parvin's asking, is it okay to keep going with the webinar and answering questions later? Yeah, we're going to move on. I promise. And I've got an eye on the time, so I do promise. All right, so we talked about what is a deficiency, okay? And again, some states allow it, some states do not. So back to Kathy's question, why a short sale? Because again, avoiding that foreclosure, financial relief, control over the sale, and again, that potential for a deficiency waiver, which is always helpful. So what are some of the alternatives to a short sale? They can remain in the property and continue to make payments. I mean, again, I'm not saying all of these are going to fit for any particular situation, but a short sale is not for a situation where the seller simply wants to sell. All right. This has to be, because of all of the negatives to it, it has to be a situation where they have no other option. So if they have the option of staying in the property and continuing to make the payments, that would obviously be the first choice, whether they love it or not. A loan modification. Okay, definitely, if they're in a short sale situation, they should be addressing that first. And lenders are very, very frequently more willing to do a loan modification than walking away, particularly in states that don't have the deficiency judgments. Maybe they can refinance. Okay, if they're not also in foreclosure, this could be an option. Maybe they've had a really high interest rate and they can refinance into something that's lower before they start missing payments. Forbearance, this is a situation where they are able to go to the lender. Maybe they're already a little bit behind in their mortgage, and instead of doing a foreclosure or a short sale, they can basically have what they currently owed kind of tacked to the end, or have several months of payments tacked to the end, and just get a little bit of relief in the short run. They could rent the property out. Again, they don't want to do this if they're already in foreclosure. Please don't do that to the tenants. But in lieu of a short sale, they could go ahead and rent the property and hold on to it for a while. We just briefly mentioned the deed in lieu of foreclosure. If they're just like, don't want to deal with it anymore, before they even go, necessarily go into foreclosure or go into a short sale, that may be an option as well. And then there are government assisted programs that we will get to in just a couple of minutes as well. Yeah, Rocco, and you're absolutely right. And like I said, I'm not saying any one of these is better than the other. It's just each individual situation definitely needs to be looked at. All right. So what are the current trends? All right. You know, you've already attested to the fact that we are seeing an increase in short sales and potentially foreclosures across the country. So, you know, we've been dealing with rising interest rates. Now, generally, if they've got a fixed interest rate, that's not going to be an issue. But a lot of people went into adjustable rates, and now the rates are adjusting, and they can't, you know, they can't deal with it. They can't handle the new payments. Inflation may, you know, increases in property taxes, increases in insurance, all sorts of situations like that. Now, keeping that in mind, overall, and particularly for those of us that remember what happened in the before days, the amount of short sales is still low. Okay, there has been an increase, as we've talked about, and it will vary a lot from region to region. I know Florida has definitely seen a bump in short sales and foreclosures in recent months. Keep in mind on the plus side, unlike in the Wild West days, the lenders are more organized. So if they're going to allow a short sale, it is usually a lot more streamlined. And again, we'll talk about the war stories. Anybody who did short sales back in the day, we share war stories just like people share hurricane stories and things like that. And then, like I said, different states have different laws with the deficiency judgments and different programs as well. Okay, so what is the process that we're going to be following? We're going to kind of go through two things. We're going to do a brief look at the process, and then we're going to look at it from your perspective. So the seller pre-short sale, they first need to identify that they want to do a short sale or potentially want to do a short sale. I will re-emphasize, they do not have to be delinquent on their mortgage. They should, before they do anything else, reach out to the lender. Now, different lenders are going to handle things a little bit differently. They may want to wait until they have the offer on the property before submitting the entire short sale package. Other lenders are going to want a short sale application up front, and then the offers come later. So it's very important for the seller to reach out to the lender, at minimum, get the forms that they're going to need to fill out and start working on those. And they've kind of alerted the lender to what's going to be happening. Very, very, very important. The seller should be talking to a financial advisor and attorney. I don't know about you, but I am not an attorney, and I did not like playing one, you know, when we're talking about short sales or foreclosures. Just getting right back to that whole, you know, deficiency judgment situation. The attorney is the best person to be able to advise that seller as to whether or not it is in the state. That attorney is also going to be the best person to negotiate a deficiency waiver if it comes down to that. And then the financial advisor is going to be able to help them put together all of the documentation that they're going to need to show the lender those hardships. And then, of course, they do need you. They do need somebody who's knowledgeable about short sales, who is going to be able to walk the tightrope with those listings, because that's a lot of fun right in and of itself. Let me take a quick look here. How long should the lien holder be expected to respond? We'll get to that, I promise. Okay, let's see. Usually the case conventional, FHA can benefit. Yep, great. You guys are answering each other. We'll continue right on. All right, perfect. All right, so you, as the listing agent, you are going to be asked to do a market analysis or a broker price opinion. There's a little bit of a difference between the two. Broker price opinion is usually a lot more detailed than a typical CMA that we would do for a listing. It's going to depend on what the lender wants. Most of the time, you're going to hear them ask for a broker price opinion. And it's basically like one step back from a full appraisal, but one step forward from a CMA. Most of your systems, a little bit of an aside here, I don't know if anybody is using RPR, but they actually have a full analysis program in there that's basically more like a broker price opinion. Here's the trick for you as the listing agent. You need to be able to price the property competitively so it sells quickly, but not too low to where the lender wants to reject the offers. And it is a tightrope. And again, we can talk about horror stories if we've got the time at the end. And you're going to need to be able to defend whatever that listing price is to the lender. You're going to need to show that this is what's going to allow the property to be sold, quickly, but at the same time with the maximum amount back to the lender. And make sure you've got that the marketing plan. Now, your marketing is going to be basically what you would do in any case, but you're going to need to show it to the lender in most cases. So again, all of the normal stuff. Key thing though, in addition to, is you absolutely want to make sure that you are disclosing to the potential buyers out there that this is a short sale situation for a lot of reasons. First and foremost is that they will typically take a little bit longer than a normal sale. Now, again, it depends on the lender, but most of the time they will take longer. The other reason is that there's every chance that they'll be under contract, and then the lender is either going to want to negotiate the price or just reject the offer out of hand. So even though the seller has already agreed to the contract, because it is a short sale, it's like the lender has it's not a right of first refusal, but it's effectively that. And then, like I said, beyond that, and I saw this a lot when so many short sales were also under foreclosure at the same time. The buyer needs to understand that we can be going through this whole short sale process and that foreclosure action is still continuing on the other track. They do not stop a foreclosure because we're under a contract for a short sale. It's going to continue on, and now it's a race to who gets to the finish line first. And so many buyers just did not understand that the property could be foreclosed right out from under them. So disclose, disclose, disclose. I'm just taking a look at so Kathy, I am curious how long ago that was, because I know back in the day, they that pre-20, 2010, 2011 time period, a lot of the lenders were insisting on that. They should not be insisting on that these days. The key here is not that they are behind in their current mortgage or in their payments. It's that there is a hardship that absolutely requires that they have to sell the property. And I gave you the example of, a military moving them overseas or moving them out of state or something like that. There are situations where perhaps for health reasons or death in the family or something of that type of situation, there is a hardship that going forward is not going to allow them to pay that mortgage. A good example of that as well is, perhaps right now today, they are using their life savings to pay that mortgage every month. So up to this point, they have been on time every month. But once all of their savings runs out, they are no longer going to be able to continue making those payments. And if the property is upside down, in other words, current market value will not pay off the mortgage, then sooner or later there's going to be a short sale. And in that case, it makes a lot more sense for the lender to go ahead and start the process now. So this is another reason why it's super important for a person that's doing a short sale to involve their attorney, because an attorney can assist them in demonstrating to the lender that there is a genuine hardship that will not allow them to continue paying on this particular home, and that has nothing necessarily to do with already being in arrears. But that's a good point, because you will get some argument on that back and forth. So the common disclosures, again, I already said, disclose that it absolutely is a short sale. Is, what is the property? Conditions of the property, because that's going to affect how much you can sell the property for. And again, these are just, it's not in every situation, but a lot of times if they're already in distress, maybe they are already behind in their mortgage payments. They probably don't have the funds then to be maintaining the property. So all of that is going to affect how much they're able to sell the property for. So you want to document that. And the lender is absolutely going to want to know that it is an arm's length transaction. So there's no selling a short sale property to the brother or anything like that. And they're on the lookout for fraud, because there is a lot of short sale fraud going on out there. And then just a little side note, if this is a topic that absolutely is something that you want to kind of specialize in, there are different certifications out there for you as real estate agents. And I definitely suggest that you take a quick look at those. All right, let's initiate the short sale, guys. Again, seller contacts the lender. Definitely request that application right away. It's up to the lender whether they want it back now or with that first offer. They are going to want a net sheet at some point. We're going to talk about that net sheet several times throughout the rest of the program. But the one thing I want to emphasize over and over and over is that net sheet needs to be as accurate as you can possibly get it. Now, typically you're going to be looking to your, to your recommended title company or settlement company for those net sheets, but make sure that they are accurate. And a few things to keep in mind: make sure your commission is on there. I know that sounds silly, but believe me, it needs to be on there. Make sure any and all HOA or condo back owed, whatever, assessments, whatever the case may be, anything that the HOA or the condo is going to expect to be paid needs to be on there. Are there any secondary lien holders? Maybe a line of credit that needs to be paid off. That needs to be on there. Bottom line, if anything is left off of there, high probability the lender will refuse to allow it to be paid. So that's how important this is. We've already talked about the broker price opinion and the listing agreement. So then the lender's going to do their due diligence, verify that hardship. They are going to do their own assessment of market value. And that can get a lot of fun in and of itself. And again, I mean, I've had situations where the lender has chased the value down. They did not want to listen to, our expertise. We're here in the trenches, and they've done their own assessments and thought that the property was worth a lot more than current market value truly is. So they're going to go ahead and obviously you receive the offers. You're going to evaluate those with the seller. Just like any other transaction, seller's going to choose which one they want to go with. Typically, the one that you're going to want to advise them to go with is the one that provides the lender with the highest net proceeds. Now, a lot of times in other situations, the seller may have other concerns. They may be more concerned about a quicker closing date. They'll take a lower offer if it's a quicker closing date, whatever the situation is. In a short sale, you want to go straight to the net proceeds, because as we've talked about, 100% of that needs to go to the lender, and that's all they care about. They don't care about closing dates or anything else like that. And then again, the documentation, it will vary a little bit by lender, but most of the time they're going to need that hardship letter. They're going to need the purchase contract, buyer's proof of funds, the listing agreement. Again, they're going to ask for it every single time. The preliminary net sheet. Now, if it's not already been provided, you want to make sure it's updated based on this current offer. Okay. They're going to need a release from the seller to look at their financials, and the seller's affidavit. We got a question in here. It's right now, it's an active listing. Yeah, Kathy, again, if the seller has an attorney or you can recommend an attorney, this would definitely be something to discuss on an individual basis there. Because if there is a true hardship, they do not have to be behind in their current mortgage. They simply have to demonstrate that in any kind of a long-term situation, they cannot continue to make that payment. And again, there could be a variety of reasons that for whatever reason, the lender's representative is not quite understanding. Cheryl, you mentioned that being under contract does not stop the process from moving forward to foreclosure. But if the seller is not in default and just needs a short sale because then yes, Cheryl, in that case, you are correct. So when I was talking about the parallel tracks, it's only if they were also in foreclosure. If it's a situation where they are not in foreclosure, then that does not apply. So that's good. No, it does not. The filing of a short sale does not automatically cause a foreclosure. The only thing that's going to cause the foreclosure is not paying the monthly payments. So again, your job throughout the listing process and getting to closing is constantly communicating with the lender. And again, they have gotten so much better than they used to be, but you definitely want to confirm that they've received the full package. I mean, those packages can be just enormous. And it used to make me crazy because a specific lender that shall go nameless here would constantly tell me that they didn't get everything, even though I had and they insisted on having it by fax, which was always fun. So definitely follow up constantly, make sure they have every piece of paper that they want. They're probably going to ask you for updated BPOs on a regular basis, updated financial information on a regular basis, even as they are investigating everything. Now, it says here, negotiate the terms, and to some degree you can, and there's nothing that says you cannot, but be very, very, very careful with this. I again highly recommend, because you're talking to a lender now, to suggest that they have an attorney doing those negotiations. But if it's a pretty easy one, pretty limited, yeah, you're going to be in a position to have to negotiate those things. Persistency, and we've already talked about addressing those potential for deficiency judgments. So in the lender's approval gives us 4 months to sell, after which the foreclosure proceedings will begin. Yeah, and that's not unusual, but it gives you time. It gives you a lot of time. So, once the foreclosure starts, then you got to keep an eye on that too. So Ashley, being the relocation company, possibly purchasing the property, is this something that can be completed? Okay, so that's going to be a little bit of an interesting situation, Ashley, because generally you're talking about actually purchasing the property, which means it's actually changing hands. And that's going to need lender approval as well. And that's just going to add a whole nother level of interesting interesting stuff going on in there. Now, if you were technically the buyer in that type of a situation, and it's going to be a short sale, then you're just taking on the role, as the buyer. Where it will get sticky is getting in there with the deficiency judgments and a true market value on those properties. And the BPO will have to reflect the as is versus the repaired value. Correct, because unless the seller is going to be doing all of those repairs beforehand, which generally they're not, yes, it would have to reflect the as is value. And that's exactly what we were just talking about earlier, with being able to document the repairs that are going to need to be done. Good question, though. That will get a little complicated going on in here. All right, so somebody was asking me about timelines earlier. Please, please, please understand that these are very, very broad guidelines. It is going to vary with every lender, how organized the lender is, how quickly the seller gets all of the documentation to the lender. So many things are involved in here, but roughly you can expect that the lender is going to take 1 to 3 months, and I'm talking about from the point that you are submitting the entire package, including a contract. They're going to take 1 to 3 months to be to be looking at that. 1 to 3 months, but that's good compared to what it used to be. So let's take it. All right. And they're going to go through their entire process. And again, it's going to vary a little bit from lender to lender, but they're going to do their initial review. They're always going to assign somebody to that file, basically somebody who's going to dig deeper, do their own valuations, that type of stuff. And then they're going to, this is where you're going to have a lot of communication going on back and forth between the assigned negotiator and yourself. Just getting them whatever it is that they're going to need in order to come to a decision. And then eventually in there, they're going to do a final review. And if all goes well, they're going to issue that lender approval letter. Now, from that point, they're only going to allow you a certain number. Well, and again, it depends on at what point this happens. So if it's happening in the initial process before you even have the offer, then they're going to give you a certain period of time to get it sold and then closed. Other than that, from the point that you get the lender's approval letter on a contract, they're going to give you a very limited amount of time to get that thing to a closing. You can negotiate that depending on how much your area needs, how much time the buyer needs, but it's usually going to be very limited. And the key thing here with the short sales is that whatever is agreed upon for that closing date, there's almost no chance of an extension. So make sure that it is adequate. So getting prepared for the closing, again, coordinating with the title company or the closing attorney. This part here is going to be almost identical to, to any other transaction. But the key thing that you're going to want to make sure of is, again, that whatever was submitted to the lender as the net sheet needs to match what the final settlement statement says. There's not going to be any adjustments there. The lender is generally going to want to see that final, the final closing disclosure or settlement statement or whatever it is that you're using in your particular area. And they're going to want to have some final approvals on all of that. Again, adhere to the deadlines in the contract, but more importantly, ironically, adhere to the deadlines being set by the lender, because typically they're not going to adjust them. Asking if there is a recording will be available. I think so. It will take a little while, but I believe we are going to put this out for a video replay. And then post-closing is again where it can kind of get tricky, because we're going to need to make sure that all of those, subordinate, including your commission, those are all paid, and that the balance agreed upon gets sent over to the lender, and it gets sent over within the time frame that they have insisted upon. Okay, so a few more. We're getting pretty close to the end here, and then we'll have some time for some more questions. So a few other considerations. Super important to understand that just the short sale alone does not automatically clear any other liens on the property. So some of these things that we've talked about, are there HOA or condo liens? Are there unpaid property taxes? Are there other kinds of maybe a secondary lender or municipal fines attached to the property? All of these things, they are not cleared automatically in a short sale. This is why it is so important to have all of these things on the settlement statement, on the preliminary net sheet, so that the lender is aware of them and they can be paid at closing just like um, any other transaction. And then, again, mitigating legal and title issues. Again, it's just a matter of communication. Seller needs to communicate with the lender, professional assistance. We need to do thorough title searches, mainly to make sure that we're coming up with any potential additional costs or liens that may be on the property. And then for the buyer, I mean, it's always critically important, but it's really important in a short sale or foreclosure to make sure that the buyer is getting their title insurance. Okay. Somebody mentioned that 1099-C form. Yes, absolutely right there. Now, a couple of things to keep in mind with this is that if there is a deficiency judgment, yes, they're going to be notified. And the assumption is then that they're going to pay off whatever the amount is in the deficiency judgment. If, and this even potentially applies to states that do not allow deficiency judgments, from the IRS perspective, if there is a cancellation of debt, the IRS considers that to be income. And that's particularly where you're going to see that 1099-C form sent out to the seller. And they're going to have to pay taxes on that as taxable income. Don't make me explain why the IRS considers that to be taxable income, but they do. So even if there is no deficiency judgment that gets paid off, the seller will probably get a tax hit as well. And again, I've said it 16 times now. I'm going to say it one more. Make sure that the seller is consulting with their financial advisor, their attorney, their tax advisor, so that they understand these issues. It was a little bit crazy, you don't want to be in a position of trying to explain all of this to them. Let's see real quick. Jacob is an extension to the closing date. Now I'm talking about with the lender who is accepting the short sale. Once they have agreed to the short sale, in other words, that approval letter has been submitted, there's typically going to be a closing date on there. Now that's going to be a closing date that you or the seller have provided to the lender. But once it is on that letter, that approval letter, they will almost never extend. There may be situations where it happens, but they're agreeing to generally what you or the seller has provided to them. So just make sure there's adequate time up front on there. If the buyer ends up having a delay or something like that, it's going to be a problem. Christina, I'm going to borrow that. Yeah, it's to account for the funny money. I love that. Okay. Since seller net sheet needs to match the closing, who is the best person to do the net sheet? I would recommend that that you have a title or a settlement or an escrow office handle it for you, or even better, if there's an attorney involved, they can assist with that as well. Again, working very, very, very closely with the title or escrow settlement company, depends on what state you're in there, in a short sale is always going to be beneficial, because they are the ones that are going to be able to do a quick search of public records to find any potential liens against the property much better than you can or should, and help you make sure that everything is on that net sheet. So that is my recommendation on that. Is there anything a buyer's agent can do to help communicate the value of the property? Generally, it's going to have to go through the listing agent, but I can pretty much tell you that a listing agent is probably going to appreciate any assistance that you can give. So, if you have some contacts that can help value the property based on its conditions, definitely offer it. I can't imagine a listing agent anywhere that's going to turn that down. However, the communication will have to go through the listing agent. All right, a few more things that are super important to cover, and then I think we're going to have plenty of time for some questions. So there is, I've talked a couple of times about government programs to assist with this. There is at a federal level something called the Mortgage Forgiveness Debt Relief Act. Okay, we were just talking about those situations of taxable income from the deficiency. This program is designed to help a homeowner, and it has to be on their primary residence. This is not going to apply to vacation homes or investment properties. But if it was their primary residence, then under this program, they're able to go ahead and have a certain amount of money forgiven. Okay, so up to 750,000 in shortfall. Right now, it is extended through the end of this year. So as soon as we get into 2026, you're going to want to double check and make sure that that is either has been extended or renewed. How do you convince the seller that they will walk away with some cash upon close? You don't. You don't. Basically, what they're going to theoretically walk away with, and this goes back to, is it their primary residence? This is one way. So it's not so much that they're going to walk away with cash in their pocket, because they're typically not going to. What they will do, however, is minimize the impact on their credit score, minimize the amount of time that they will have to wait to get a new loan for a new property. Also, if they are in a state with no deficiency judgments, whatever that shortfall was, it's kind of like money in their pocket. They don't have to pay that part back. And if it was their primary residence, then the program that I'm talking about right now will also, again, not cash in their pocket, but it's money they won't have to pay taxes on. So in other words, it's all a matter of saving them from having to put out more money. Does that make sense? Okay, short sales in the military. And this one is one that is like really, really, really important to me. Like I said, one of my earliest short sales was with a military family. And boy, was that an education for all of us. Okay. Short sale protection, again, the PCS orders. This is when they are being ordered to move. They, when they're in the military, they don't have any choice on that. So there are protections built in to where, a lender, I won't necessarily say has to agree to a short sale, but there are those protections in there that they will generally will. And this is a perfect situation where they do not have to be behind in their mortgage in order to qualify for a short sale. And again, it's a lot easier these days, but there was that issue constantly going on. They could not go into foreclosure because that would affect their security clearances. There was issues going on with, does a short sale in and of itself affect their security clearances? So not anymore, but those were all questions that had to be kind of straightened out. And it was really, really tough for a long time. The Service Members Relief Act, okay? Again, within the military, there's all kinds of protections and financial assistance and things like that, where maybe they can even potentially avoid doing a short sale altogether. So we talked earlier about loan modifications, particularly if we're talking about VAs and different things like that. It's a lot easier to get those modifications and get interest rate reductions and things like that to avoid the short sale altogether. Now, the next one here on my list, and I had a piece of paper here somewhere. This one is here it is. VA, this was as of April 7th, VA plans to eliminate servicing purchasing program. Okay, this has been back and forth, up and down. I have to go double check and see where it is today because it's been on again, off again. But pay attention to this one if you're involved in short sales involving a VA loan. It used to be for quite a while that the VA had a program to allow short sales on these VA loans. And the key to it was protecting the VA borrower from a lot of these adverse circumstances. And it looks like they're eliminating that program. So stay tuned on that one. We'll have to see. And then the other thing that the military offers, which is fantastic, is all sorts of legal services, financial counseling, all sorts of different programs. And what's crazy is a lot of time your active duty service member won't even know about them. So, just keeping this little bit of a list going, if you happen to be working with somebody who's got a VA loan, make sure that they know what programs are available to them. And then we've touched on this a little bit already. There's all sorts of issues with those multiple lien holders. And I know one of the things, and maybe some of you that have been involved in these transactions recently, one of the things that was actually absolutely drove me crazy and happened all the time is that the lender would want to negotiate how much the HOA or the condo association was going to get paid. If there was like an outstanding balance that was owed to the HOA. And then the HOA would dig their heels in and refuse. And you'd have and it wouldn't be directly because it'd be going through you, which was always so much fun. So keep in mind that sometimes the primary lender will want to negotiate how much the secondary lien holders are going to get paid off in order to maximize the amount that gets paid off on that primary loan. So lots of fun. So keep those in mind when you're going into the process. And then with that, I would like to ask, did you all learn anything? Okay, we're going to definitely take a look at the questions here, but did you learn anything today? And if so, give me one new thing you learned. And we got about 4 more minutes too, so we can talk questions. We can swap war stories. And anybody that's recently done or back in the day did a short sale, have a horror story you want to share? Yeah, the VA benefits for the short sale is a real important one. And like I said, you're going to have to keep on top of those, only because so much stuff is on the chopping block right now. Deborah, yes, the mortgage forgiveness program, like I said, it's good through the end of this year. We'll have to see if it is going to be extended, but for right now, that is a fantastic one that you definitely can let the sellers know about, because a lot of them probably don't. Josie, again, I've got to send the recording through our legal thing, I guess, just to make sure that I don't have any of you up on screen and things like that, and then we'll get it out to you, I promise. I will also, even before that, make sure that you have the outline of today's class with all of the important information. So alternatives to short sale. Continuing, yeah, absolutely. When you are, asked to talk to a seller about potentially listing a short sale, these may be conversations that you want to have, rather than jumping straight into. It may be that none of them are applicable, but good conversation to have. Look out for that deficiency judgment. Absolutely, yes. And Annette, good. I'm glad to hear that you've got a little bit better understanding. Does the lender try to negotiate? Depends on the lender. Sometimes they'll try to negotiate everything, but generally tax liens are pretty difficult to negotiate, but they may try. Raul, you're very welcome. All right, so the last slide here is just a little bit of a QR code. If you don't mind taking a super quick survey, let me know what you did like, what you didn't like, and what we can bring to you in the future. So Miguel, my pleasure. All right, guys. See you next time.